The door splintered under the third kick. Sarah Morrison clutched 4-year-old Tommy against her chest, his fever burning through her thin nightgown. Emma, 7, pressed herself into the corner, hugging the wooden doll her father had carved 3 days before he died. 1 hour. Mrs. Morrison. Silas Kern filled the doorway, torchlight dancing across his cold smile. Your husband caused that cave-in. 5 men dead. Your deed is their compensation now. Daniel was on the surface when it collapsed. Sarah's voice cracked. You know he was innocent. Tell it to their widows. Kern turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Mrs. Morrison. Don't bother the neighbors for help. I've already explained what kind of woman lets her husband get good men killed. Through the window, Sarah watched her neighbor's lamp extinguish. She knocked anyway, desperation overwhelming pride. The door stayed closed. Tommy coughed blood onto her sleeve. Emma whispered, Mama, are we bad people? Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. 6 months of walking had led to this, a weathered wooden sign reading, Red Mesa, Pop, 3.47, and the last 7 cents in Emma's small fist. Sarah Morrison slumped against the signpost, her daughter pressed against one side, her son burning with fever against the other. The September sun hung low over the Arizona desert, painting the dusty road into town the color of dried blood. Mama! Emma's voice barely rose above a whisper. Tommy's shaking again. Sarah pulled her son closer, feeling the terrible heat radiating from his small body. His breathing came in shallow, painful gasps. Each cough brought flecks of red to his lips that Emma tried to hide with her sleeve. 3 days, Sarah thought. Maybe 4 before pneumonia takes him completely. She opened her canvas bag with trembling hands. 1 piece of hardtack, stiff as leather, half a canteen of water, brown with dust. Nothing that would save a dying child. Listen to me. Sarah's hands moved to fix Emma's tangled hair, to wipe the trail dust from Tommy's burning cheeks. Her children had to look presentable, worthy of mercy. You're going to meet some nice people in town. They'll give you food, a warm bed. You're coming too. Emma's fingers dug into her mother's arm. Right, Mama. The lie stuck in Sarah's throat. Of course. Sweetie, Mama just needs to find work first. You'll stay with a good family while I... Tommy convulsed in her arms, his small body seizing. Sarah bit back a scream, rocking him as he coughed violently, painting her dress with blood. Dear God, not yet. Please, not yet. The sound of hoofbeats pulled her attention to the road. A lone rider approached, silhouetted against the dying sun. Sarah struggled to her feet, forcing her exhausted body upright. This might be her only chance. The rider slowed 20 feet away. A man in his 30s, trail-worn and dusty from what looked like months on the range. His horse, a sturdy roan, nickered and sidestepped, nostrils flaring at the smell of sickness. Ma'am. He touched the brim of his hat. You folks headed into Red Mesa. Sarah stepped forward, her voice steadier than she felt. Sir, I have a proposition. These children need... Tommy's body went limp in her arms, another fit of coughing racking his small frame. The man dismounted in one smooth motion, closing the distance between them. Jesus! His calloused hand pressed against Tommy's forehead. He's burning up. Please. Sarah unwound her threadbare shawl to mop the sweat from her son's face. As she moved, the cord around her neck caught the light a simple silver pendant etched with the initials D.M. and the year 1879. The man froze, his eyes locked on the necklace. His face went white beneath the trail dust. Sarah watched confusion flash across his features, followed by something that looked like recognition, then guilt, raw and devastating. Sir, I'm asking you to take them into town. The words tumbled out in a rush. Find them a family, a church, anyone who can... What about you? His voice had changed, gone rough with some emotion she couldn't identify. I'll manage. I just need to know they're safe. Fed? That Tommy gets medicine before... Her voice broke. Emma's fingers twisted in Sarah's skirt. No. Mama. No. No. The man stared at the necklace, then at Sarah's face, as if trying to solve an impossible puzzle. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of an old promise. No. Sarah's legs nearly gave out. Please, I'm begging you. I'm not taking just them. He moved to his horse, beginning to gather the reins. All of you stay with me, tonight. Why? Sarah's voice cracked. Why would you help us? He lifted Tommy from her arms with surprising gentleness, settling the boy against his chest. Because I made a promise to someone, long time ago. He looked at her again, that strange recognition still swimming in his eyes. You will. Now let's get this boy to warmth before we lose him. Sarah stood frozen, her mind reeling. How do you know my... Mrs. Morrison? He cut her off, helping Emma climb onto the horse behind Tommy. Or should I call you Sarah? The world tilted. Her maiden name, a name she hadn't used since marrying Daniel 8 years ago. A name only family would know. How do you know who I am? The question came out as barely more than a whisper. Later. He reached down, offering his hand. Right now, we ride. Sarah took his hand, letting him pull her up behind Emma. The horse shifted under their combined weight but held steady. As they started forward, Sarah's hand went to the necklace at her throat, the one piece of her brother David she'd kept after the war took him. The stranger saw the gesture. Something in his expression crumbled and rebuilt itself in the span of a heartbeat. What's your name? Sarah asked. Jack Dalton. The name meant nothing to her, but the way he said it like a confession made her skin prickle with unease. Behind them, the sun finally dipped below the horizon. Ahead, the lights of Red Mesa flickered to life in the growing darkness. And between them, Tommy's labored breathing counted down the seconds they didn't have. Jack kicked the horse into a faster pace. Sarah held her daughter and prayed to a god she'd stopped believing in 6 months ago. On the road behind them, a second rider emerged from the scrub brush. He'd been watching, waiting. Now he turned his horse south, racing towards Silver Hollow with news that would change everything. Sarah Morrison had been found. The McAllister ranch materialized from the darkness like a broken promise. Sarah had imagined something grand, sprawling barns, neat fences, prosperity. Instead, she saw a weathered main house, 2 sagging bunkhouses, and a grain storage shed with half its roof missing. Only 6 men emerged from the buildings to watch their arrival, fewer than any working ranch should have. Jack dismounted and handed Tommy down to Sarah with careful hands. The boy's breathing had grown more labored during the ride, each inhale rattling in his small chest. Wait here. Jack's voice was gentle but firm. He disappeared into the main house. Emma pressed against Sarah's side, her eyes wide as she took in their surroundings. Mama, where are we? Somewhere safe. Sarah lied, hoping to make it true. The door opened again. Jack emerged, followed by a man in his 60s with silver hair and a face carved from granite. Henry McAllister studied them with eyes that had seen too much and forgiven too little. Mr. McAllister, this woman needs work. The children need shelter. Jack's words were careful, measured. Henry's gaze moved from Sarah's worn dress to Emma's frightened face to Tommy's labored breathing. His expression never changed. We're not a charity. Dalton, winter's coming. I've already let 3 hands go. Can't afford deadweight. The word hit Sarah like a physical blow. Deadweight. That's what her children had become in this brutal calculus of survival. I can cook, clean, mend, Work the garden. Sarah stepped forward, forcing her exhausted body straight. You don't even have to pay me. Just let my children sleep indoors. Please. Henry's attention fixed on Tommy. The boy chose that moment to cough, a wet, desperate sound that brought fresh blood to his lips. Emma gasped and tried to wipe it away with her sleeve. The boy's sick. Henry's voice was flat, final. I can't risk pneumonia spreading to my men. I've seen it take down whole crews. Emma's face crumpled. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she buried her face in Sarah's skirt. Sarah felt her own composure cracking, humiliation and desperation warring in her chest. Then take it from my wages. Jack's voice cut through the moment. $15 a month for their room and board. I'll work double shifts. Henry's eyebrows rose. 15. You're already sending half your pay to your mother in Kansas. That doesn't leave much for boots and tobacco. Then I'll work triple. Jack met the older man's gaze without flinching. A long silence stretched between them. Sarah watched Henry's face, trying to read the calculation happening behind those cold eyes. Finally, he spoke. You know these people? Jack hesitated for just a heartbeat. I owe a debt. To her. To someone she loved. Henry studied Jack's face, then Sarah's, as if weighing souls on invisible scales. Fine. 1 month trial. He held up a weathered hand before Sarah could express relief. But if the boy dies, they leave immediately. I won't have death's bad luck on my land. I've seen what it does, spreads like poison. Sarah felt the air leave her lungs. That's monstrous. That's survival, ma'am. Henry's expression never wavered. You don't know this land like I do. Death breeds death. I've buried enough people to know. The impossible choice crystallized in Sarah's mind with terrible clarity. Accept, and have 1 month to save Tommy's life. Refuse and watch him die tonight from cold and sickness in the open desert. She looked down at her son, barely conscious in her arms. At Emma, terror written across her small face. At the darkness beyond the ranch, vast and unforgiving. I accept. The words tasted like ash. Jack led them to the farthest bunkhouse, a small structure that smelled of disuse and mouse droppings. But it had a wood stove, 2 narrow beds with actual mattresses, and walls that blocked the wind. Compared to 6 months of sleeping under bushes and in abandoned sheds, it was a palace. Jack lit the stove while Sarah laid Tommy on one of the beds. Emma climbed up beside her brother, curling her body around his like she could will her own warmth into him. There's no medicine. Sarah's voice was hollow. No doctor. I'll bring what I can from town tomorrow. Jack pulled a thin blanket from a shelf, shaking out the dust. Willow bark tea helps with fever. Tomorrow might be too late. Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, her hand on Tommy's burning forehead. I can feel him slipping away. Jack crouched beside her, his face level with hers. In the flickering stove light, she could finally see him clearly. Weathered skin, tired eyes, but something kind in the set of his mouth. Something that reminded her of, "You knew my name before I told you." Sarah turned to face him fully. "You know something about me." Jack reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a small photograph, edges worn soft from handling. He placed it in Sarah's palm. The image showed 2 young men in Union uniforms, arms slung around each other's shoulders. One was Jack, years younger, his face unlined by sun and hardship. The other, Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. "That's not Daniel. But he looks exactly like David Mackenzie, your brother." The room spun. Sarah gripped the edge of the bed to steady herself. "David died in the war, 1879, Bull Run. Her voice broke. "I never got to say goodbye. He talked about you every day we served together." Jack's voice was rough with memory. His little sister Sarah, who could ride better than any boy in the county, who sang hymns while doing chores, who wrote him letters every week without fail. He paused. He made me promise that if anything happened to him, I'd find you. Make sure you were safe. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. You're 8 years late. I tried. Jack's hands clenched into fists. After the war, I searched. But you'd moved. Gotten married. The trail went cold. I thought... He stopped. Swallowed hard. I thought maybe you were happy somewhere. Safe. So this is guilt. Sarah heard the bitterness in her own voice and couldn't stop it. You're helping me because you failed my brother. I'm helping you because he was the only family I ever had. Jack's eyes met hers, unflinching. And he'd haunt me to hell if I let his sister starve. Sarah wanted to scream at him, to rage against this stranger who claimed connection to the brother she'd mourned for 8 years. But exhaustion pulled at her bones, and Tommy's breathing filled the space where her anger should have been. Why didn't he mention you in his letters? He did. Jack from Kansas, the farm boy who couldn't shoot straight. A ghost of a smile crossed Jack's face. He probably made me sound like a fool. Sarah remembered those letters, saved in a trunk she'd lost when Kern seized her house. David had mentioned to Jack, someone who made him laugh during the horror of war. Before she could respond, Tommy's body went rigid. His back arched, his eyes rolling back as seizure gripped him. Sarah screamed, grabbing her son as his limbs thrashed against the thin mattress. Tommy! Tommy! Jack lunged forward, helping Sarah turn the boy on his side as foam appeared at the corners of his mouth. Emma shrieked and pressed herself against the wall. Hold him steady! Jack grabbed rags from a shelf, dunking them in the water bucket. Keep his airway clear. The seizure lasted an eternity and 30 seconds simultaneously. When Tommy finally went limp, his breathing was even more shallow than before. His lips had taken on a blue tinge that made Sarah's heart stop. A shadow fell across the doorway. Henry McAllister stood there, his face unreadable in the darkness beyond the stove's light. The clock's ticking. Mrs. Morrison. His voice carried no emotion. 29 days left. He turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing in the night. Sarah bent over her son, pressing her ear to his chest to hear his heartbeat. It was there, faint but steady. She began to sing the same lullaby she'd sung the night Kern destroyed their lives. The melody her own mother had sung to her and David when they were small. Tommy's breathing eased slightly. Not much, but enough. Jack moved to the door, his jaw tight with some emotion Sarah couldn't name. There's a doctor in town, Doc Reynolds, but he doesn't come out to ranches anymore. Why not? Henry refused to pay him 2 years back for treating a Mexican worker who got crushed under a wagon wheel. Jack's voice was bitter. The man died anyway. Doc swore he'd never set foot on this property again. Sarah's blood ran cold. So even if I could pay, he won't come? Not here? The realization settled over her like a burial shroud. She'd escaped one monster only to place her children in the care of another, and her son's life hung in the balance, ticking down with Henry McAllister's cruel deadline. 29 days to save Tommy with no medicine, no doctor, and no guarantee of mercy from the man who held their fate in his calloused hands. Through the window, Sarah saw Henry standing on the porch of the main house, watching their bunkhouse, waiting for death to collect its due. Dawn broke on the third day, and Tommy's fever finally surrendered. Sarah hadn't slept in 72 hours. Her world had narrowed to cool cloths pressed against burning skin, to spoonfuls of water coaxed between cracked lips, to prayers whispered in the darkness. When she touched her son's forehead and felt normal warmth instead of that terrifying heat, she collapsed against the bed frame. "Mama, you did it?" Emma threw her arms around Sarah's neck. Strong hands caught Sarah before she hit the floor. Jack had been checking on them every few hours, bringing fresh water and wood for the stove, Now he lowered her gently into the chair beside the bed. "Rest," he said. "I'll watch him." When Sarah woke, sunlight streamed through the window and something smelled wonderful. Jack stood at the small stove, heating a pot that released the rich scent of beef broth. "You went to town?" Sarah's voice was hoarse from disuse. "Last night. Figured the boy would need real food when he woke up." Jack gestured to packages on the table. "Got willow bark tea for fever, new blankets, and these." He held up 2 small wooden horses, beautifully carved. "For the kids." Sarah stared at the supplies. "You spent your wages. Money grows back. Kids don't." Jack poured broth into a cup. "Besides, your brother would have done the same for me." Tears pricked Sarah's eyes, but for the first time in months, they weren't tears of despair. "Thank you." By afternoon, Tommy was sitting up, sipping broth, and examining his new wooden horse with wonder. Emma clutched hers like a treasure, her first toy since they'd lost everything. Sarah reported to the main house to begin her work. The kitchen was primitive but functional. 6 ranch hands filed in for breakfast, rough men with weathered faces. They ate her biscuits in silence, but one older hand with kind eyes nodded his approval. "Best biscuits in 3 counties, Aunt Ma'am." Henry McAllister ate without comment, his expression unreadable. But he didn't complain. And in this harsh world, Sarah was learning that silence could be its own form of acceptance. The rhythm of work felt foreign after months of survival. Her hands remembered kneading dough, scrubbing pots, the simple dignity of useful labor. For the first time since Daniel's death, Sarah felt like a person instead of a ghost. That afternoon, Henry called her into his office. Sarah's heart hammered as she entered. The room smelled of leather and tobacco. Henry sat behind a scarred desk, his face shadowed. "You've been adequate," he said finally. Sarah waited, barely breathing. Henry pulled $2 from his pocket and placed them on the desk. "For the boy, buy him some candy in town." Sarah stared at the coins as if they might vanish. "Mr. McAllister, don't make me regret this." He turned back to his ledgers, dismissing her. Sarah clutched the money, hope blooming painfully in her chest. Maybe Henry wasn't the monster she'd imagined. Maybe they had a chance here. Emma found her own purpose that afternoon. The ranch hand called Cruz 50-something, Mexican, with gentle hands and a patient manner was working with the horses. Emma approached shyly, asking if she could help. Cruz studied her for a moment, then handed her a brush. "Start with the mare. Long strokes. Talk soft." Sarah watched from the kitchen window as her daughter's face transformed. Emma smiled for the first time in memory, the horse nuzzling her hair. "Mama, look, she likes me." Emma's voice carried across the yard, high and clear with joy. Sarah pressed her hand to her mouth, tears streaming freely now. Happy tears. She'd forgotten what those felt like. The next day, Jack drove them into Red Mesa in the ranch wagon. The town was small but bustling, with a general store, a church, a boarding house, and 3 saloons. People turned to stare at the newcomers, but their expressions held curiosity rather than hostility. At the general store, Sarah bought peppermint sticks for the children with Henry's silver dollars. Tommy's eyes went wide, and Emma hugged her piece of candy like gold. "Mrs. Morrison." A woman's voice, warm and cultured. Sarah turned to find a handsome woman in her 50s, well-dressed and smiling. "I'm Martha Cooper. I run the boarding house." She gestured to a building across the street. "I heard you're out at McAllister's place." "Yes, ma'am. We arrived a few days ago." Martha's smile deepened. "If you ever need anything company, advice, help, please know the church has a fund for families in need. We take care of our own here." The kindness in Martha's voice made Sarah's throat tight. "Thank you. We're managing now. But I mean it, dear. Martha squeezed her hand. Red Mesa may be small, but we look after each other. As they loaded supplies into the wagon, Sarah felt lighter than she had in months. The children chattered happily, their bellies full, their hands sticky with candy. Jack drove with easy confidence, nodding to people they passed. Sarah found herself studying his profile. Jack, why are you really doing this? Just for David? Maybe at first. He kept his eyes on the road. But now, I don't know. Feels like I'm supposed to be here. They stopped to let the children play in a small park at the edge of town. Sarah sat beside Jack on the wagon bench, watching Emma teach Tommy a clapping game. I blamed you, Sarah said quietly. For David, for everything. I was wrong. You were in pain. I was cruel, and you kept helping anyway. Jack turned to look at her. That's what family does. Family. The word felt strange on her tongue. That's what we are, aren't we, by now? Sarah considered this. After 6 months of isolation, the idea of belonging somewhere to someone felt terrifying and necessary all at once. I think so. Yes. A rider passed on the road, tipping his hat politely to Sarah. Then he did a double take, his eyes narrowing as he studied her face. For a moment, Sarah saw recognition flash across his features. The man spurred his horse and rode away quickly. You know him? Jack's voice had gone tense. No, but he looked at me like he did. Jack watched the rider disappear around a bend. Probably nothing. But Sarah noticed his hand drift to the rifle beneath the wagon seat. They returned to the ranch as the sun began its descent. Tommy had fallen asleep in the wagon bed, exhausted from his first real outing in months. Emma hummed the clapping game tune, peaceful and content. That night, Sarah tucked the children into bed, their bellies full, their faces clean, their hearts light. Mama? Tommy mumbled sleepily. Can we stay here forever? Sarah smoothed his hair, wanting desperately to say yes. We'll see. Baby. Get some rest. Later. She sat with Jack outside the bunkhouse, watching stars emerge in the vast Arizona sky. The ranch was quiet except for the occasional sound of horses moving in their corral. Your brother saved my life once, Jack said into the darkness. Took a bullet meant for me at Bull Run. Sarah's breath caught. I didn't know that. I wrote you. 3 letters. They all came back. Address unknown. Daniel and I moved a lot for his work. We were never in one place long enough. Sarah stopped, realizing how rootless her life had been even before disaster struck. They sat in comfortable silence. The night was cool, the stars brilliant. For the first time since Daniel's death, Sarah felt something like peace settling over her. Jack, do you think we can really start over here? I think people deserve second chances. From the main house, Henry appeared on his porch. He looked toward their bunkhouse, then nodded to himself before going inside. Sarah allowed herself to hope. Maybe he was softening. Maybe they would survive the month. Maybe Tommy would recover fully, and they could build something here. She went inside to clean the supper dishes, her movements automatic, her mind finally quiet. Emma and Tommy slept peacefully. Jack had gone to check the horses one final time. The bunkhouse felt safe, warm, almost like home. Then something slid under the door, a folded piece of paper. Sarah's hands trembled as she picked it up and unfolded it. The handwriting was blocky, careful, anonymous. Mrs. Morrison, leave Red Mesa. He knows you're here. You have 1 week. This is your only warning. No signature, no explanation. Sarah crumpled the paper and threw it into the stove, watching it catch fire. But one corner fell to the floor, incompletely burned. The word knows remained visible, accusing. She moved to the window and looked out at the darkness beyond the ranch. There, on the distant ridge, illuminated by moonlight, sat a lone rider, watching, waiting. As Sarah stared, the rider turned his horse and disappeared into the night. Her hands shook. Her peace shattered like glass. Someone had found her, and her week of borrowed happiness was about to end. 5 days passed in careful normalcy. Sarah watched the ridge every night, but the rider never returned. The anonymous warning burned in her memory, but without proof or explanation, she kept silent. Tommy grew stronger. Emma flourished under Cruz's patient teaching. Jack worked from dawn to dusk, always nearby, always watchful. Sarah almost convinced herself the warning had been a mistake. Then the wagon arrived. It was mid-morning on the 15th day of their trial month. Sarah was kneading bread dough when she heard wheels on the ranch road. Through the kitchen window, she watched a well-dressed man in his 40s step down from a polished buggy, entirely out of place in this rough country. He introduced himself to Henry on the porch. Sarah couldn't hear the words, but she saw Henry nod and gesture toward the bunkhouse. Her stomach clenched. The man crossed the yard with practiced ease, his boots barely dusty. He knocked on the bunkhouse door where Emma was watching Tommy. Sarah dried her hands and hurried over. "Mrs. Morrison." The man's smile was warm, reassuring. "I'm Reverend Thomas Shaw, from Silver Hollow. I've been trying to locate you for some time." Sarah's blood turned to ice. Silver Hollow. "Yes, ma'am. The church there has been concerned about you since your husband's passing." Shaw pulled a handkerchief and dabbed his forehead. "We wanted to offer our condolences and, well, some restitution." "Restitution?" Sarah's voice came out flat, suspicious. "Mr. Kern, the mine owner, has been troubled by the circumstances of your husband's death. He's authorized a payment of $500 as compensation for your loss. $500, a year's wages, medicine for Tommy, a future for Emma, everything they needed." "Why?" Sarah asked. Shaw's smile never wavered. "Between you and me, Mrs. Morrison, I believe Mr. Kern's conscience is troubling him, but there is one condition." "What condition?" "You'd need to sign a document stating the matter is settled. No legal action. And—" Shaw paused delicately. "Mr. Kern has arranged a house for you in Silver Hollow, a position at the church. He feels responsible and wants to ensure your family is cared for. He wants me to come back." Sarah felt the trap closing but couldn't see its full shape yet. "To accept his help? Yes. I have the papers in my buggy if you'd like to review them." Jack appeared from the barn, his face tight with suspicion. He pulled Sarah aside. "This smells wrong. It's $500. Jack, Kern doesn't have a conscience. He's got an angle." "What if he doesn't? What if he's actually trying to make things right?" Jack's jaw worked. "I don't trust it." "I need time to think," Sarah told Shaw. "Of course. I'll return in 3 days." Shaw tipped his hat and departed, his buggy disappearing down the road in a cloud of dust. Sarah didn't notice Jack saddle his horse and follow at a distance. Jack kept Shaw's buggy in sight all the way to Red Mesa. The Reverend went straight to the Lucky Dollar Saloon. Jack tied his horse at a hitching post across the street and waited. 20 minutes later, a second man entered the saloon. Jack recognized him from Sarah's description, Silas Kern himself. Jack moved to the side of the building where a broken window gave him a view of the interior. He crouched in the alley, listening. "She buy it," Kern's voice carried through the window. "Like a lamb to slaughter," Shaw replied. "She'll sign. Good. Once she's back in Silver Hollow, I can finish what I started. Can't have her claiming foul play about the mine. That silver vein is worth $50,000. I won't lose it to some widow's sob story." Jack's hands balled into fists. Shaw's voice held hesitation. "You said you just wanted her signature to close the legal case." "I said a lot of things. Reverend, your cut is $100. After that, you forget you ever met me." A long pause. Then Shaw's voice, quieter. "Deal." Jack ran for his horse. He rode hard, pushing the animal to its limit. He had to reach Sarah before she made a terrible mistake. Had to tell her that everything, the Reverend, the money, the supposed guilt was a lie designed to silence her forever. The ranch appeared in the distance. Jack urged his horse faster, but the yard was empty. Cruz stood by the corral, his face grim. "Where's Sarah?" Jack shouted, not bothering to dismount. "Gone to town with Mr. McAllister." Cruz's expression was troubled. The Reverend came back, said there was urgency with the papers. "What papers?" "Settlement papers. Boss said it was the right thing to do. Took her in the wagon an hour ago." Jack's world tilted. "An hour." He spun toward the main house, kicked the door open without knocking. Henry's office was empty. Jack rifled through the desk, looking for anything that might explain his hand closed on a telegram. "Widow located at your ranch. $200 to keep her there until I arrive. Kern." The date was 2 weeks ago, the day after Sarah arrived. Henry had known who she was from the beginning, had contacted Kern, had played the role of reluctant benefactor while setting Sarah up for slaughter. The kindness, the $2 silver, the subtle softening, all theater. Henry had been paid to keep Sarah trapped and comfortable until Kern could prepare his legal documents. "You son of a bitch," Jack whispered. He ran to the bunkhouse. Emma sat on the bed, alone, tears streaming down her face. "Mr. Jack, Mama left without saying goodbye properly. She said she'd be back soon, but she looked scared. Where's Tommy?" Emma's face crumpled further. "Mr. Cruz is watching him. In the barn. I wanted to come, but Mama said to stay here and—" Jack ran to the barn. Cruz stood outside, his head in his hands. Cruz. "Where's Tommy?" Cruz looked up, his face bloody. A gash above his eyebrow dripped red. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I tried to stop them." "Stop who? Where's the boy?" "Henry's foreman. Said he had orders. Took Tommy on horseback. Rode north." Jack grabbed Cruz by his shirt. "When?" 10 minutes ago. Maybe less." Jack released him and looked north toward the Badlands, toward territory where law didn't reach, where Sarah would never find her son alone. He ran back to the bunkhouse. A piece of paper was pinned to the door with a knife. Jack's hands shook as he read it. "The boy is collateral. Widow turns herself in by noon tomorrow, or he disappears. Kate." Emma appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Jack, what does that say?" Jack couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. He'd brought Sarah here. He'd trusted Henry. He'd failed David's sister just as he'd failed David. And now Tommy was gone. In town. Sarah sat at a desk in the land office, pen in hand. Henry stood at her right shoulder. Shaw at her left. The document before her read, "Full settlement and release of all claims." "This says I can never mention Daniel's death again," Sarah said slowly. "Standard legal language," Shaw assured her. "Sign it, Mrs. Morrison." Henry's voice was gentle, almost fatherly. "Take the money. Start fresh. It's what's best for your children." Sarah's hand trembled as she lifted the pen. $500. A house. Safety. She pressed the nib to paper. The door slammed open with such force it cracked against the wall. Jack stood in the doorway, wild-eyed, with Emma clutching his hand. "Sarah, don't." Sarah's pen stopped. "Jack, what are you—" "They're lying. All of them." Jack strode forward and threw the telegram on the desk. "Kern doesn't want to pay you. He wants to silence you so he can keep the silver vein your husband discovered on land he owned." Sarah picked up the telegram, her hands shaking. She read it once, twice, then looked at Henry. You were paid to trap me." Henry's grandfatherly mask slipped. His face went cold, calculating. Business. Ma'am, $200 is $200. Can't let sentiment interfere with profit. I knew nothing about this, Shaw protested. I heard you. Jack's voice was deadly quiet. In the saloon, with Kern, making your deal. Shaw's face went pale, then red. He had no defense. Sarah stood slowly. She looked at the paper, at these men who had manipulated her desperation, who had used her children as pawns. Something inside her, something that had been bending for 6 months, finally snapped. She tore the document in half. Where is Kern? Her voice was ice. Where is he? He's coming tomorrow. Shaw stammered. With the sheriff. It's all arranged. Arranged. Sarah's laugh was bitter. You mean he's bringing corrupt law to finish what you started? Henry reached into his jacket and pulled out a revolver. Dalton, you're fired. Take the woman and her brats and get off my land. Jack stepped forward. Gladly. But know this. Henry cocked the hammer. Kern's sheriff will be looking for her, and when they find her, she'll hang for theft of mine property. Kern's documented that her husband stole papers proving the silver vein. That's a hanging offense in this territory. Sarah felt the trap's full dimension. She couldn't stay, couldn't run, couldn't hide. Kern owned the law here. We need to get Tommy, she said to Jack. Jack's face told her everything before his words did. Sarah. Tommy's gone. Henry's men took him. Kern has him as collateral. You turn yourself in by noon tomorrow, or... The world went silent. Sarah's vision narrowed to a single point. Her knees gave out. Jack caught her before she hit the floor. No. The word came out broken. No. No. Emma started screaming. They ran, out of the office, to the wagon, racing back to the ranch through the gathering dusk. Sarah couldn't speak, couldn't think. Her son, her baby, taken. When they reached the bunkhouse, Cruz waited with the note. Sarah read it, and something inside her died. She sank to the floor, holding Tommy's wooden horse, the toy Jack had bought him just days ago, the symbol of hope, of new beginnings, all lies. She'd trusted again, believed again, let herself hope, and they'd stolen her child as punishment for that weakness. Emma knelt beside her. Mama, please say something. But Sarah had no words left. She rocked back and forth, clutching the toy horse, her mind fragmenting under the weight of this final betrayal. Jack stood in the doorway, watching the woman he'd promised to protect crumble. He'd failed David, and now he'd failed Sarah in the worst possible way. Darkness fell, and somewhere in the Badlands, Tommy Morrison cried for his mother. Sarah sat on the bunkhouse floor, holding Tommy's wooden horse. She hadn't moved in an hour, hadn't spoken, hadn't cried. She simply rocked back and forth, her eyes fixed on nothing. Emma knelt beside her mother, trying to reach through the silence. Mama, Mama, please talk to me. No response. Sarah's mind had retreated to some unreachable place where her son's face played on endless repeat. His smile, his laugh, the way he'd said Mama that morning, like it was the safest word in the world. Jack burst through the door, Cruz limping behind him. We go after him. Tonight. Cruz shook his head, pressing a rag to his bleeding temple. The Badlands at night. That's suicide. Rattlesnakes. Cliffs you can't see. Then we die trying. Jack started gathering supplies. Rope. Canteens. His rifle. Better than letting them take him where we'll never find him. Listen to me. Cruz gripped Jack's arm. I know those lands. The Chiricahua Apache control everything north of the canyon. They don't kill on sight, but they don't welcome strangers, especially not at night. Sarah's voice came out like broken glass. Then I go alone. Jack turned. Sarah, my brother died because of you. The words tumbled out, vicious and uncontrolled. My husband died because of Kern. Now my son's gone because I trusted people. I'm done trusting. Jack's face went white. Your brother died saving my life. That was his choice. You took him into that battle. Sarah stood, the wooden horse clattering to the floor. If you'd been faster, stronger, better maybe he'd be alive, and I wouldn't be here. The words hung in the air like poison. Emma started crying softly, pressing herself against the wall. Jack opened his mouth, closed it, for a moment. Sarah saw the guilt she'd meant to inflict wash over his face. Then something hardened in his expression. I'll find him, with or without you. He grabbed his rifle and walked out. The door closed. Silence pressed down like a physical weight. Emma's voice was small, broken. He's a good man. Mama. Good men don't save people, Sarah whispered. They just delay the inevitable. She sank back to the floor, and memory dragged her under. She was back in Silver Hollow, 6 months ago, running to the mine entrance where Daniel had been working, other miners standing back, their faces grim. Silas Kern on the ridge above, watching with cold calculation. She'd climbed down into the collapsed tunnel, screaming Daniel's name. Found him under the rocks, his chest crushed, blood pooling beneath him. Protect the kids, he'd gasped, his last words, his only priority in death. She'd begged the miners to help dig him out, to get him to a doctor. They'd looked at Kern. Kern had shaken his head. They'd walked away. She'd stayed with Daniel's body until dawn, holding his cooling hand, singing the lullaby their children loved. Then Kern had come with his papers and his lies and his 1-hour deadline, and she'd run. Another memory surfaced, one she'd never witnessed but had imagined 10,000 times. David on the battlefield. Taking a bullet meant for Jack Dalton. Falling. Dying alone while Jack survived. Everyone I love dies. Sarah thought, everyone. Senora. Cruz's voice pulled her back. He sat on the floor beside her, his weathered face kind, despite the blood still trickling from his wound. I lost my family too. Cholera. 20 years ago. Wife. 2 daughters. And my son. Sarah looked at him, seeing him clearly for the first time. I tried to die with them. Cruz's voice was steady, matter of fact. Stopped eating. Stopped caring. Just waited for God to take me. What happened? God wouldn't take me. Kept putting people in my path who needed help. A child fallen in a well? A woman whose wagon broke down in the desert? A man bleeding from a knife wound? Cruz met her eyes. Finally realized maybe I'm alive because they died. To protect others like I couldn't protect them. You think Jack's my penance? Bitterness leaked through Sarah's words. I think he's your lifeline, and you're his. Before Sarah could respond, a figure materialized from the darkness beyond the doorway. Jack stood there, rifle raised, facing a man who'd appeared from nowhere. The stranger was native, perhaps 40, with weathered bronze skin and long black hair braided with leather strips. He wore a mix of traditional clothing and practical trail gear, and moved with the fluid silence of someone born to this land. Jack's hand trembled on his rifle. Who are you? I am Nantan of the Shirikawa. His English was clear, educated. I heard white men speaking of a child taken to my lands. You speak English. I learned many things in the white man's school, before they broke their promises. Nantan's expression held no hostility, only statement of fact. Stealing children is wrong, even white children. You know where he is. Hope cracked Jack's voice. The men who took the boy are camped at Skeleton Canyon. They wait for someone. I watch these lands. I always watch. Sarah appeared in the doorway, Emma clutching her skirt. You can take us there. Nantan studied her, the desperate mother, the hollow eyes, the spine held straight through sheer will. "I can, but you should come. The boy will need his mother's face, not a stranger's." "I'm coming." Sarah's voice left no room for argument. Jack started to protest. Sarah cut him off with a look. "He's my son." They assembled in the yard, this impossible team. Sarah, unarmed and traumatized. Jack, guilty and desperate. Emma, who refused to stay behind. Nantan, the only one who knew the terrain. Cruz, who agreed to stay and mislead Henry's men if they returned. They rode into darkness, Nantan leading them onto paths invisible to untrained eyes. The Badlands swallowed them harsh rock formations, treacherous footing, the constant sound of things moving in the brush. Emma rode behind Jack, her small arms locked around his waist. Sarah rode alone on Cruz's horse, silent as a ghost. "My people will see us," Nantan warned. "If they challenge, let me speak. If they don't listen, then we die together." Jack finished. "Better than dying alone." An hour into the ride, Sarah's horse stepped into a gopher hole. The animal screamed a horrible, high-pitched sound. The crack of breaking bone echoed across the rocks. Sarah flew forward, hitting the ground hard, her head striking stone. "Sarah!" Jack was off his horse in seconds. Blood ran down Sarah's face from a gash above her eyebrow. She sat dazed, the world spinning. Nantan knelt beside the horse, his face grim. "The leg is broken. There is only one mercy." He drew his knife. The horse's suffering ended quickly. Sarah vomited into the rocks, her body shaking. Emma dismounted and tried to hold her mother, but Sarah couldn't be comforted. "Everything I touch dies," she whispered. "Everything." "Sarah, that's not—" Jack began. "Don't." Sarah's voice was dead. "Just don't." They redistributed weight, Emma riding with Nantan now. Sarah behind Jack, though she sat rigid, refusing to hold on. Jack could feel her shaking against his back. Another mile, and 3 Apache warriors emerged from the rocks. Rifles aimed. Nantan spoke rapidly in his language. The exchange was tense. Rapid fire. One warrior pointed at Sarah, his words harsh even without translation. "He says the white woman brings death," Nantan translated. "Her presence angers the spirits." Sarah stood, swaying. "Tell him he's right." Nantan looked surprised. Sarah faced the warrior directly. "I do bring death, but not by choice. Please, my son. That's all I ask. After that, I'll go wherever you want." The warrior studied her face, this white woman covered in blood and dirt, who'd acknowledged her curse instead of denying it. He spoke to Nantan, then lowered his weapon. His companions did the same. They disappeared into the rocks as silently as they'd come. "What did he say?" Jack asked. "He said she has the eyes of a mother bear. He will not stop us." They continued in silence. Dawn approached, painting the sky the color of ash. Ahead, smoke rose from a canyon, Skeleton Canyon, where Tommy waited. Nantan held up his hand. "The camp is just ahead. 2 men by the fire, but there may be more hidden." Jack started forming a plan. "Nantan and I will flank them. Sarah and Emma stay—" "No." Sarah's voice cut through the dawn. "I'm going in. They'll kill you. Then they'll kill a mother protecting her child. I can live with dying. I can't live with hiding." Jack saw the truth in her eyes. She'd reached some final place where fear no longer mattered. Only Tommy mattered. "Sarah, this is my choice. Jack, let me make it." He wanted to argue, to protect her, to fix this, but looking at her blood-streaked face, her trembling hands that somehow still held steady, he recognized something David had possessed, the courage of the truly desperate. "All right," he said quietly, "but we go together. All of us or none of us." Sarah nodded. They crept to the canyon's edge. Below, a small camp flickered with firelight. 2 men sat drinking coffee. And there, tied to a wagon wheel, was Tommy. Sarah's breath caught. Her son. Alive. She stood, preparing to walk into that camp, to offer herself for her child. Then hoofbeats echoed through the canyon. A third rider appeared, coming from the south. The two men by the fire stood, greeting the newcomer. The rider dismounted, and the rising sun illuminated his face. Sarah's legs gave out. Jack caught her, but she was staring, unable to process what her eyes were seeing. The rider was Daniel Morrison, her husband, the man she'd watched die 6 months ago. Sarah fainted. Jack caught her before she hit the rocks, but she was dead weight in his arms. Emma stifled a scream, pressing her fist against her mouth. Below in the canyon, Tommy's voice pierced the dawn. "Papa!" The word echoed off stone walls, impossible and true. "That's her dead husband," Jack whispered to Nantan, his voice hollow with disbelief. "The dead rise," Nantan observed quietly, "or they were never dead at all." Sarah's eyes fluttered open. She stared at the scene below, her mind fracturing. "I saw him. The rocks. The blood. His body. What you saw was what Kern wanted you to see." Jack's voice was grim. "A staged death. Daniel Morrison alive. Healthy. Clean-shaven, crouched beside Tommy and untied the boy from the wagon wheel." Tommy threw his arms around his father's neck, sobbing. The sight twisted something in Sarah's chest. Daniel stood, lifting Tommy easily. He looked up at the canyon rim, directly at where they hid, as if he'd known they were watching all along. "You might as well come down. Sarah," he called. "We need to talk." Sarah rose on shaking legs. Jack gripped her arm. "Don't. It's a trap. My son is down there." Sarah pulled free and started down the rocky path, slipping and sliding, not caring if she fell. Emma followed, Jack and Nantan close behind. They reached the canyon floor. Daniel set Tommy down but kept a hand on the boy's shoulder. His hired men, the two rough cowboys, stood with hands on their weapons. Sarah walked forward until she stood 10 feet from the man she'd mourned for 6 months. Up close, she could see he'd gained weight. His clothes were new, expensive. He looked prosperous while she looked like something dragged through hell. "Hello." "Sarah." Daniel's tone was conversational, as if they'd simply been apart for a day instead of through the grave. "You're dead." Sarah's voice sounded distant to her own ears. "I saw you. The cave-in. You were crushed. You saw what Kern wanted you to see. A body my height and build. Face destroyed beyond recognition. Easy enough to arrange when you control a mine." The words landed like physical blows. Sarah swayed. "Why?" Daniel sighed as if explaining something obvious to a child. "Kern wanted my land, the silver deposit I found under the mining claim. Worth a fortune. I refused to sell, so he suggested an alternative arrangement." "What arrangement?" "Fake my death, disappear for a while. He keeps the land and silver rights. I keep my life and receive $10,000. Daniel spoke as if discussing a business transaction. "I was going to come back for you once I'd established myself in California. It's been 6 months. Sarah's voice cracked. "I needed time to set things up properly. A new identity, property, investments. Our son almost died." The scream tore from Sarah's throat. "Emma's been terrified every single day I've been starving, walking, begging. And whose fault is that?" Daniel's face hardened. "I told Kern to give you severance money, $500. He was supposed to help you relocate. He gave me 1 hour. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. "He threatened to have me arrested. He stole our home." "Well, clearly there was a miscommunication." Daniel's dismissive tone made Sarah's vision blur with rage. She saw him clearly for the first time. Not the man she'd married 8 years ago, the charming miner with big dreams. This man was a coward who'd sold his family for comfort. "You're not the man I married. I'm the man who stayed alive. Sarah. That's what matters. Survival." Daniel gestured around the canyon. "Now here's what's happening. You signed the papers Kern prepared. I disappear back to California. Eventually, you and the kids join me after everything's legally settled. You want me to lie for you. I want you to be smart. Kern owns Sheriff Booker. You run. You hang for theft of mining documents. You cooperate. We all win. Fresh start in California. Sarah looked at her children. Emma stood beside Jack, tears streaming down her face, finally understanding that her father was alive but not the hero she'd remembered. Tommy, confused and frightened, reached for his mother. "Baby, close your eyes," Sarah said softly. "But Mama, close them. Tommy." Her voice turned to steel. Tommy obeyed, squeezing his eyes shut. Sarah turned back to Daniel. "Did you ever love us, truly?" Daniel hesitated. Just a heartbeat too long. "Of course I." "You hesitated." Sarah's voice was ice. "I'm tired, Sarah. Don't read into... You hesitated." Behind Jack, Emma made a broken sound. She'd heard. She'd understood. Daniel's mask of civility cracked. "Fine. You want the truth? I felt trapped. 3 years of marriage, 2 screaming kids, debt, failure at every turn. Kern's offer was my escape, my chance at the life I deserved." Emma sobbed openly now. Jack covered her eyes, whispered something meant to comfort, but the damage was done. Sarah felt something cold and final settle in her chest. "So everything was a lie." "Not everything. I liked you well enough at first, but life got heavy. Sarah, too heavy." She looked at the man she'd mourned, had loved, had built a life with. All of it, every memory, every tender moment contaminated by this truth. "If I sign your papers, you promise the children will be safe. I swear it. And you'll be a father to them. In California." Daniel paused again. "Eventually. Once things are settled." "You're lying." Sarah's voice was flat with certainty. "You want my signature so I can't testify against Kern? Then you'll disappear again. You'll take the money and we'll never see you." Daniel's face flushed with anger. "Think what you want, but you're signing those papers, because if you don't..." He pulled a revolver from his jacket and pointed it at Tommy. Emma screamed. Sarah lunged forward, but Daniel's hired men blocked her path. "I'll tell Kern you resisted arrest," Daniel continued calmly. "He'll have you hanged for theft and fraud, and I'll take the children anyway, as their legal father. They'll grow up knowing their mama was a criminal who abandoned them. You would kill your own son." Sarah's voice shook. "I won't have to." "You'll sign, because you're weak. Sarah, you've always been weak." Jack stepped from behind his hiding spot, rifle raised. "Put the gun down. Morrison." Daniel spun toward him. "Who the hell are you?" "Someone who actually knows what family means." "Unlike you?" Recognition dawned on Daniel's face. "Wait. Dalton, Jack. Dalton." He laughed, the sound harsh and ugly. "David Mackenzie's war buddy. This is perfect. My dead brother-in-law's dead friend, playing hero." "David was 10 times the man you'll ever be," Jack said quietly. "David's dead. I'm alive. That's all that matters in this world's survival." Daniel kept his gun trained on Tommy. "Now back off, or the boy gets hurt." Nantan emerged from the rocks on the opposite side, bow drawn, arrow nocked. Daniel's hired men reached for their weapons. Mexican standoff. 5 armed people in a canyon at dawn, and Tommy Morrison at the center. Sarah raised her hands. "I'll sign." "Sarah, no." Jack started. "For my children, I'll sign." Sarah looked at Daniel. "But first, you let Tommy walk to Jack. Both children leave with him. Not a chance. Sign first. Then shoot me, because I won't sign until my children are safe." Daniel's frustration mounted. His hand shook slightly on the gun. "You don't have leverage here. Neither do you. Forced signatures don't hold up in court. Even Kern knows that. You need me to sign willingly, or the whole plan falls apart." Stalemate. Daniel's jaw worked. Sarah could see him calculating, weighing options. "Fine," he said finally. "The boy walks, the girl stays." "Both children," Sarah insisted. "One, your choice." Sarah. Daniel's smile was cruel. "Who do you love more, the sick boy or the strong girl? Choose." Emma's breath caught. Sarah looked at her daughter, 7 years old, brave beyond measure, watching her mother with terrified eyes. Then at Tommy, 4 years old, still recovering, trembling in his father's grip. This was the cruelest choice of all, Sophie's choice. The impossible decision no mother should face. "Emma," Sarah said clearly. Emma's face crumpled. "Mama." "Emma goes to Jack." Daniel laughed. "Wrong answer. I thought you'd pick the weak one. Shows what kind of mother you are." But Sarah leaned close to Emma as the girl passed, whispered so softly only her daughter could hear, "When you reach Jack, get Tommy out no matter what happens. Do you understand? No matter what?" Emma's eyes widened. She nodded once, understanding her mother's real plan. "Go!" Sarah shouted. Emma ran. Daniel's men raised their rifles. Jack fired first not to kill, but to wound. One man went down clutching his shoulder. Nantan's arrow took the second man in the thigh. Daniel grabbed Tommy as a shield, pressing the gun to the boy's head. "Everyone stop!" Chaos froze. Tommy whimpered. Emma stood halfway between Daniel and Jack, paralyzed with fear. Sarah ran at Daniel, screaming. "Take me instead!" Daniel shoved Tommy aside. Grabbing Sarah instead, his gun pressed to her temple. "Everyone backs off or she dies!" Tommy and Emma both screamed. Jack's rifle was aimed, but he couldn't fire without hitting Sarah. Sarah felt the cold metal against her skin, felt Daniel's arm crushing her throat. And something inside her, the last piece that had been holding her together, simply let go. "Daniel," she said calmly. "Do it." "What?" "Pull the trigger. Free them from me. I'm just baggage now. A burden they don't need." "You're bluffing." "I stopped bluffing 6 months ago when you died." Sarah's voice was eerily peaceful. "When you made me watch my children starve, when you turned me into this broken thing, do it. End it. Let them have a chance without me." Daniel's hand shook. He was staring at a woman who'd reached the place beyond fear. A woman with nothing left to lose. "You're insane," he whispered. Sarah's hand shot up, grabbing the barrel of his gun. She wrenched it toward Daniel's own body. "If you won't, I will." They struggled. Daniel stronger, but Sarah absolutely feral with rage and desperation. The gun swung between them, both hands on it, fighting for control. The shot echoed through the canyon like judgment. Daniel fell. The bullet had torn through his thigh, not fatal, but devastating. He hit the ground, screaming, blood spreading across the dirt in a dark stain. The gun clattered from his hand. Sarah stood over him, chest heaving, the weapon now in her grip. Her hands didn't shake. Her eyes held no tears, only cold, crystalline clarity. "Mama!" Tommy ran to her, throwing his arms around her legs. Emma sprinted across the canyon, Jack right behind her. Sarah pulled both children against her side, never taking her eyes off Daniel. "You shot me!" Daniel gasped, clutching his leg. "You actually shot me!" "Not where I was aiming." Sarah's voice was flat. "I was aiming for your chest." Jack reached her side. "Sarah, give me the gun." "Not yet." Sarah crouched beside Daniel, pressing the barrel against his other thigh. "You're going to tell the sheriff everything. Kern's bribes, the fake death, the stolen land, all of it." "Or what?" Daniel's face was white with pain and fury. "Or I make sure you never walk again. And then I tell the sheriff anyway. Your choice." Daniel stared at the woman he'd underestimated, seeing something in her eyes that made his resistance crumble. Okay, I'll talk. Just get that gun away from me." Sarah stood, finally letting Jack take the weapon. Her legs trembled but held. She'd crossed a line she could never uncross, but her children were alive. That was all that mattered. Nantan moved to Daniel's hired men, both wounded but alive. He used their own rope to bind them. "More riders coming," he said calmly, his head cocked toward the canyon entrance. "Many riders." The sound of hoofbeats grew louder. Sarah pulled her children behind her, positioning herself between them and whatever came next. 8 riders entered Skeleton Canyon. At their head rode Silas Kern, still impeccably dressed despite the desert dust. Beside him, a man with a sheriff's star, perhaps 50, with a hard face that had seen too much and compromised more. 6 deputies flanked them, all armed. Sheriff Booker took in the scene, Daniel bleeding on the ground, 2 hired men tied up, Sarah holding a gun, Jack and a native man standing as her unlikely guard. "Sarah Morrison," the sheriff announced, his voice carrying the weight of false authority. "You're under arrest for theft of mining property, destruction of legal documents, and assault with a deadly weapon." "I stole nothing." Sarah's voice rang clear across the canyon. "My husband." "Your dead husband can't testify for himself." The sheriff interrupted. "Actually," Daniel's voice was weak but audible, "I'm not dead, and I'm willing to testify that Kern bribed me to fake my death so he could steal my land claim. The silver vein is mine by legal right. I have documents, bank transfers, letters, all hidden in California." Kern's face went purple. "He's delirious from blood loss. Can't you see he's wounded? I'm clear enough to know you tried to steal $50,000 worth of silver from me." Daniel spat. "You think I'd let you keep it all? I kept evidence, insurance." Sheriff Booker looked between them, his confidence wavering. "This is complicated." Kern leaned close to the sheriff, whispering urgently. Sarah caught only fragments. "Our agreement. Promised. Don't forget who?" The sheriff straightened, his face hardening again. "I'm arresting both Morrison and Kern pending investigation, and the woman for assault." "What?" Sarah's voice rose. "I'm the victim here." "You shot a man? That's assault with a deadly weapon. He kidnapped my son. According to him, he's the father, has parental rights." The legal trap closed. Sarah saw it clearly now in this corrupt system. She had no standing, no rights, no protection. "Sheriff," Kern said smoothly, recovering his composure. "While we're at it, arrest Dalton too. He fired on my employees. That's attempted murder." Jack stepped forward. "In defense of, you admit to shooting them." The sheriff's hand moved to his own weapon. Jack's jaw tightened. "Yes." "That's enough. Hands up." "Dalton." Nantan moved between the sheriff and Jack, his presence suddenly commanding despite being outnumbered. "Sheriff, you have no jurisdiction here." "Excuse me. We stand in Apache territory. By the Treaty of 1872, only tribal law applies east of Skeleton Canyon. Your badge means nothing on this land." The sheriff's face flushed. "That treaty's barely worth. Want to test it?" Nantan gestured to the canyon rims. Apache warriors appeared on the ridges, 10, 15, perhaps more. All armed, all watching. Try to take prisoners from our land. See what happens. Sheriff Booker's hand moved away from his weapon. He looked at Kern. "This ain't worth starting a war over. I'm not dying for your silver. We had a deal?" Kern's voice rose to a shout. "Deal's off. I'm not fighting Apaches for you." Kern's control shattered. He pulled his own revolver, pointing it wildly at Sarah. "Then I'll finish this myself." Emma screamed. Tommy buried his face in his mother's skirt. Jack stepped in front of Sarah. "You'll have to go through me first." "Gladly." Kern's hand shook with rage. "Wait." Sarah's voice cut through the moment. "Kern, I'll make you a deal." Everyone froze. Jack turned. "Sarah, what are you doing?" "The only thing I can..." Sarah met Kern's eyes. You want the land? Take it. I sign over all rights to the mining claim. But in exchange, you confess to the sheriff. Right here. Everything you did. Kern laughed, a harsh bark of sound. Why would I do that? Because Daniel's already talking, and I have leverage you don't know about. Sarah reached into her dress pocket and pulled out a folded paper. My husband kept a journal. Every bribe, every threat, every illegal deal. He sent me copies before he dyed his insurance policy in case you betrayed him. Jack's eyes widened. Was she bluffing? Kern studied her face. Show me. You confess first, then I burn it in front of you. Your word against a dead journal. Sheriff, you choose. She's bluffing, Kern said to the sheriff. Sarah's voice rang out clear. March 12th, 1887. Kern gave me $500 to approve unsafe tunnel bracing. I agreed. God forgive me. Daniel's face went white. She'd quoted him exactly words he'd drunkenly confessed to her 2 years ago, never thinking she'd remember. Kern's certainty wavered. You're bluffing about having it written down. Want to risk it because I can send this to the territorial governor in Prescott, or to the mining commission in Washington, D.C. Your choice: confess to one corrupt sheriff or face federal investigators. The sheriff spoke up. Kern, if she's got documentation, you're done anyway. Cut your losses. What guarantee do I have she'll destroy it? Kern's voice had lost its confidence. My word. Sarah's voice was iron. And unlike everyone else in this canyon, I keep my promises. The silence stretched. Kern's hand slowly lowered the gun. His face aged 10 years in 10 seconds. Fine. The word came out bitter. I may have offered Daniel Morrison financial incentives to expedite the sale of his land claim, and I may have misrepresented the circumstances of the mine collapse to protect company assets. That's bribery and fraud. Kern, the sheriff said slowly, it's business. It's a confession in front of 10 witnesses. Sheriff Booker actually looked relieved. Silas Kern, you're under arrest. You can't. I'll have your badge. I own half the territory. Probably, but I'll sleep better tonight. The sheriff nodded to his deputies. Cuff him. As they restrained Kern, he locked eyes with Sarah. I'll be out in 6 months, and when I am, you better run far and run fast. Then I'll run. Sarah's voice didn't waver. But at least I'll run free. Sarah walked to the campfire still burning from Daniel's breakfast. She held up the paper, letting Kern see it clearly. Then she dropped it into the flames. Jack moved close enough to glimpse the paper as it caught fire. His breath caught. It wasn't a journal page at all. It was a months-old grocery list. She'd been bluffing the entire time. The paper curled and blackened, turning to ash. There, Sarah said. Your sins are buried. What you do with that mercy is your choice. The deputies led Kern toward the horses. He went without further struggle, defeated not by force but by a desperate widow's gambit. Sheriff Booker approached Sarah. Mrs. Morrison, I'll need you to testify when this goes to trial. I will, but my children need medical care first, and rest. The sheriff nodded. Fair enough. Dalton, you're free to go. Self-defense claim holds up. Thank you, Sheriff. Nantan's warriors began disappearing back into the rocks, their presence no longer needed. The Apache man approached Sarah, his weathered face showing something like respect. The mother bear is also a clever fox. Thank you. Sarah's voice was soft. For everything. For protecting us on your land. Your children are brave. Teach them to respect all lands, not just their own. I will. I promise. Nantan turned to leave, then paused. Sarah Morrison, you carry much pain, but pain can teach or it can destroy. Choose teaching. Then he was gone, melting into the canyon like morning mist. Daniel still lay on the ground, his leg crudely bandaged by one of the deputies. Sarah approached him slowly, Emma and Tommy holding her hands. "What about us?" Daniel asked weakly. Sarah looked at the man she'd loved, married, mourned, and finally understood. "There is no us. There never really was. Was there?" Daniel couldn't meet her eyes. "I suppose not." Emma stared at her father. "Are you going to jail?" "Papa. Probably." "Good," Tommy said firmly. "Tommy." Emma gasped. "He was mean to Mama. He made her cry. That's bad." Sarah knelt and pulled both children close. "Sometimes people we love disappoint us, but that doesn't mean we become like them. Do you understand?" They nodded, though she knew it would take years for that lesson to truly sink in. Jack helped Sarah onto his horse. They rode out of Skeleton Canyon in silence. Tommy asleep against Sarah's chest, Emma behind Jack. The sun climbed higher, burning off the morning chill. "That was the gutsiest bluff I've ever seen," Jack said quietly. "I learned from watching you. You bluffed Henry into taking us in that first day." "How'd you know?" "You wouldn't meet my eyes. Dead giveaway." Sarah managed a small smile. "Besides, I had nothing left to lose. Might as well go all in." "What now?" Jack asked. "We can't go back to McAllister's." "No, but maybe." Sarah's voice trailed off as she saw dust rising on the road ahead. A rider approached at full gallop. As the figure got closer, Sarah recognized Martha Cooper from the boarding house, her face flushed with urgency. "Mrs. Morrison, thank God I found you." Martha reined in her horse. "Breathing hard?" She pulled a telegram from her saddlebag. "This came 3 days ago. I've been searching everywhere for you." Sarah took the telegram with shaking hands. She read it once, twice, then dropped it. Jack caught the paper before it hit the ground. His eyes widened as he read, "To Sarah Morrison, Territorial Court Audit Complete. Husband's mining claim, valid and legal. Silver vein, confirmed on your property. Silas Kern's seizure ruled fraudulent. Full ownership restored to you, plus $50,000 in damages and unpaid royalties. Report to Tucson Land Office immediately. Judge Edmund Crawford, Arizona Territorial Court. $50,000. The number seemed impossible, life-changing, world-altering. Sarah couldn't breathe, couldn't think. After 6 months of hell, after losing everything, after nearly losing her children, justice had finally found her. But as Jack looked at Sarah's face, he didn't see joy. He saw something else entirely. "Sarah, I don't want it," she whispered. "What?" Jack stared at Sarah. $50,000, that's a fortune. That's your children's future. That money is covered in blood. Sarah's voice was hollow. Daniel's lies, those dead miners, Kern's corruption. I don't want any of it. Emma touched her mother's arm. "Mama, could we use it to help people? Like how people helped us?" Sarah looked at her 7-year-old daughter, seeing wisdom beyond her years. "What do you mean?" "Baby, give some to Mr. Nantan's people. They saved Tommy, and to Mr. Cruz, and maybe other families like us, the ones who lost everything." Sarah felt something crack open in her chest, not breaking, but blooming. "You're right. You're absolutely right." She turned to Martha. "Is Judge Crawford still in Tucson?" "Yes, waiting for you." "Then let's go. I have plans for that money." The journey to Tucson took 3 days. They traveled slowly. Tommy still recovering. Emma processing everything she'd learned about her father. Sarah was quiet, but Jack noticed a new quality to her silence. Not defeated, but contemplative, planning. Tucson was the largest town Sarah had seen since leaving Silver Hollow. Adobe buildings, bustling streets, the smell of horses and commerce and possibility. The territorial courthouse stood at the center, imposing and official. Judge Edmund Crawford was 68, with kind eyes behind wire spectacles. He rose when Sarah entered his chambers, genuine relief crossing his weathered face. Mrs. Morrison, I'm deeply relieved to see you safe. Your Honor. Sarah's hands twisted nervously. I want to do something unusual with the settlement. The judge gestured for her to sit. Jack stood behind her chair, a silent support. $20,000 goes to the families of the miners who died in the collapse, Sarah said clearly. They deserve compensation for what Kern did. Judge Crawford's eyebrows rose. That's extraordinarily generous. $10,000 goes to establishing a territorial fund for widows and orphans, families who've lost everything and need help starting over. And the remaining $20,000. Sarah met his eyes. I want to buy land near Red Mesa, start a community for people like me, people who've been driven to the edge and need a second chance, a place where families can heal and rebuild. The judge sat back, studying her. Mrs. Morrison, in 30 years on the bench, I've rarely heard anything so noble. It's not noble, Your Honor. It's necessary. I've learned something these past months. Sarah's voice strengthened. Suffering either breaks you or teaches you. I choose to let it teach. The McAllister Ranch is being foreclosed, the judge said thoughtfully. Henry's debts finally caught up with him. 8,000 acres. You could purchase it for $8,000. Sarah looked at Jack. He nodded slowly. I'll buy it. But I want Jack Dalton listed as co-owner. Sarah, I can't. Jack started. You saved our lives. You kept your promise to David. This is your home too, if you want it. Jack's throat worked. Yes. Yes. I want it. Papers were signed. Money allocated. The wheels of justice, so long frozen, finally turned. As they left the courthouse, Emma asked, Mama, what do we call it? Our new home. Sarah looked at Jack, then her children. Morrison Dalton Ranch. And it's not just ours. It belongs to everyone who needs it. 6 months later, spring arrived in Arizona like a promise kept. The ranch had transformed. New buildings dotted the landscape bunkhouses for families, a schoolhouse with glass windows, a community kitchen, a small church. 15 families now called Morrison Dalton home, their wagons arriving weekly as word spread through the territory. Sarah stood on the porch of the main house, Henry's old domain, now hers, watching children play in the yard. Tommy chased after older boys, his lungs strong, his laughter carrying on the wind. Emma sat under a cottonwood tree, teaching 3 younger children their letters. Cruz approached, his weathered face creased with satisfaction. Senora, you've built something miraculous here. We all did. Cruz. Together. Henry heard about this. He's furious. They say, let him be. He's got his own demons to face. Jack came around the corner, leading a new family, a mother with 3 children, their wagon broken down 2 miles out. Sarah, this is Mrs. Chen and her family. They came from the railroad camps. Sarah descended the steps, offering her hand. Welcome. You're safe here. We'll get you fed, settled, and your wagon fixed. Mrs. Chen's eyes filled with tears. I don't know how to repay. You don't repay. You heal. Then you help the next family that comes. That's how this works. Evening found Sarah and Jack sitting on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky impossible colors. Tommy and Emma played with a dozen other children, their voices a symphony of normalcy. I've been thinking, Jack said carefully, about this place needs a proper school, and a resident doctor, and maybe a church with an actual minister instead of Cruz reading scripture. All in time, and maybe, Jack paused. Maybe a wedding? Sarah's breath caught. Jack, not now, not even soon, but someday, when you're ready. I'd like to ask properly. Sarah studied his profile. This good man who'd kept a promise to a dead soldier, who'd saved her family, who'd built this new life alongside her. Ask me in a year, if you still feel the same. That's a yes. That's a maybe, which is more than I thought I'd ever give anyone again. Jack smiled. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their community thrive. A wagon appeared on the road. Sarah tensed. Visitors could mean trouble. But as it drew closer, she recognized Sheriff Booker. He was alone, his face grave. Mrs. Morrison. Mr. Dalton. Sheriff, what brings you here? Thought you should know? Silas Kern made bail yesterday. Came straight here. He's waiting at your gate. Sarah stood. Then I'll meet him. Jack started to object. Sarah touched his arm. I need to do this. Alone. She walked down the drive to where Kern sat on his horse, no longer impeccably dressed. He looked diminished, aged, defeated. You think you've won? Kern's voice lacked its former power. I think I've survived. That's enough. I'll appeal. Fight this. Get my land back. Maybe, but it won't change what I've built here. You can take land. Kern. You can't take family. Kern looked past her at the thriving ranch children playing. Families gathering for supper. Smoke rising from chimneys. The community Sarah had created from ashes. He saw what she'd done with his greed, his corruption, his attempts to destroy her. She'd transmuted it all into something pure. Without another word, Kern turned his horse and rode away. Sarah watched him disappear into the dusk, feeling nothing. No hatred, no triumph. Only the quiet satisfaction of having survived. That night, the community gathered for their first harvest celebration. 50 people crowded into the newly built dining hall. Crews blessed the food. Children served their parents. Laughter echoed off rafters. Sarah stood, raising her cup. To second chances, to strangers who become family, and to knowing that the end of one story is just the beginning of another. Here, here. The response shook the walls. Later, Sarah tucked her children into bed in their room, a real room, with real beds, in a real home. Mama, Emma whispered. Are we home now? Yes. Baby, we're home. Forever. Forever. Tommy was already asleep, his wooden horse clutched in one hand. Sarah smoothed his hair, remembering the boy burning with fever at the edge of Red Mesa. That desperate mother seemed like someone from another life. She stepped onto the porch, where Jack waited. The stars blazed overhead, brilliant and infinite. You did it, Jack said quietly. We did it. They stood together in the darkness, watching over the community they'd built, the families they'd saved, the future they'd carved from impossible odds. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more families in need, more wounds to heal, more fights to fight. But tonight, Sarah Morrison finally allowed herself to rest. 1 year later, on a spring morning, bright with promise. Sarah Morrison stood before her community wearing a simple cream-colored dress. Emma and Tommy flanked her, their faces radiant. Jack Dalton waited at the makeshift altar Cruz had built, his eyes reflecting everything words couldn't capture. 25 families had gathered to witness what had seemed impossible a year ago, a new beginning, born from absolute devastation. As Cruz spoke the words that would bind Sarah and Jack together, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought them here. She'd learned that begging isn't weakness when you're protecting those you love, that accepting help isn't surrender, it's survival. That family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the stranger who says no to your desperation and yes to your future. The ceremony ended with promises made and kept. The community celebrated with food, music, and the laughter of children who would never know the hunger their parents had endured. That evening, as Sarah stood beside her husband watching the sun set over Morrison Dalton Ranch. She thought of that desperate woman at the edge of Red Mesa, the one who'd been ready to give away everything precious. Sometimes the answer you don't want to hear is exactly the answer you need. Have you ever faced a moment like Sarah's where someone in authority wrongly accused you or took something that rightfully belonged to you? How did you fight back?